Tim, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too, Steve.
Now, I would like to know how one becomes the Riftmeister.
Have a singer that calls you that for a start. I don't know. I guess riffs are something I've always loved. Off camera we're talking about I've always played with somebody else all my life. I've never really been a virtuoso guitarist. And one of the first things Kirk and I, we started as Tim and Kirk. Kirk was my best friend since high school, and he and I played together. We learnt to play electric guitar together because prior to that I'd only ever really played classical guitar. And my classical guitar teacher in Western Australia used to accompany me on guitar or mandolin, or trombone, strangely enough. Just funny because Kirk's learning the bone. But one of the first things we learnt to play was "Gonna See My Baby Tonight" by the La-Di-Dahs, right? And so I played the riff in that, of course, and it just always seemed to be riffs. And I guess "Smoke on the Water." I mean, you often think "Jumping Jack Flash." You often think of these, key significant moments in songs to me that mean more than the lyrics. You know what I mean? I've never been one for lyrics. Like, some people love songs and they go, "It's just such a beautiful song because of the lyric." And I'm like, "Can you give a rat's ass about the lyric?"
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's for women.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm the riff. So it was funny at Wembley when Timmy goes, "Play the riff, Timmy." Michael says, "Play the riff, Timmy." It's when suddenly you think, "Shit, there's 75,000 people looking at me. I've got to go." Play the riff. But I love that, and in Never Tear Us Apart, the dun 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 dun. I'd leave that. The more and more and more we played it, the longer and longer and longer I'd leave the second time that riff came around, until you could go get a bite and come back, and I'd still be going, waiting. Stretch the set out as well. And then we could drop a song.
It's been an amazing career for you, and we were talking earlier, you said that's only a portion in the movie.
The telly movie, 35 years compressed into 3.5 hours. It was, there's so many stories and so much of it, we couldn't really put in, and in a sense it's compressed to keep people's attention. There could be, the actual people who produced the show, Shine, actually really wanted to make a sequel as well, but which they could do easily. But there was so many stories that aren't in there. There could have been some fantastic moments, like us touring with Queen, all Michael's friends and stuff. I mean, there's Bono's in there, I suppose, but there's so much more to it than really was in that actual show. But still, it was the first of its kind. Of course, a lot of people want to do, shows like that now. And who can blame them? But I'm just glad we were the first for an Australian band to do that. And I think in some ways, without sort of blowing our own saxophone, probably we were the ones deserving of it. I mean, AC/DC should do one and could do one, but there's only 2 Australians left in the band anyway, and they're brothers, which is ironic because
they were not born in Australia.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Bee Gees.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, it is funny actually, because a lot of my Kiwi friends will tell me proudly that all of the best Australian bands are New Zealanders.
Yeah,
but
it's
you
like
guys
Pavlova, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, we're not. We're proudly not New Zealand.
How did the movie come about?
Well, a lot of people had approached us about doing movies, documentaries, which is there's still a documentary in the pipeline, but and mini series and whatnot, and we'd sort of seen a few scripts and thought, well, no way that's going to happen. But when Mark Fennessy from Shine came to us and sort of, he's so passionate about it, and he's such an Aussie, and we'd known him for a long time, great guy. You know, and the way he talked about it, you know, it just felt like the right time. It's just a coincidence, completely a coincidence. Well, especially because none of us knew that my brother was going to stand up at the Perth Entertainment Centre and say this is possibly the last gig ever. You know, we were all as shocked as our road crew. You know, I turned around to my guitar tech and he's like, and I went, "Don't worry, he's just kidding." You know, and afterwards we were like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" You know, what? And of course, you know, the media and Channel 9 in particular went with INXS calls it a day, you know, and they've broken up, and which is all crap, you know. We can't break up. We're mostly brothers and best friends. You know, there's no such thing as breaking up. You've still got the INXS empire to run. It's just that we have, you know, maybe retired from touring.
Right.
You know, but I mean, I've got itchy fingers already, so anything's possible. But it just, as I was saying, it's just basically a coincidence that this television movie came about, you know, just after we'd sort of semi-retired. So, but it's not, you know, in fact, for all of what John did by standing up and saying that, the press around the world about the band possibly calling it a day was phenomenal. It was incredible, and in a way, it felt terrible at first, but after a while, when we started living with it, it felt kind of good. You know, we're able to sort of go, you know, and relax a bit, you know, instead of this constant thing of like, the singer, you know. It gets to be a real drag, you know. But having said that, we work with a lot of great singers.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. Well, you've it looks to younger people, you know, I'd like to do that. I want a job like that. But could you put in words just how much effort goes into creating a band like INXS?
Oh, I don't know how you put it in words. It'd be very hard. Well, there's a few more live venues coming back in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne again, which is great to see. But basically, bands like, well, in particular, INXS and AC/DC basically broke the world by touring. Okay, sure, we had a top 40 hit with The One Thing in 1983. That did help, and it was played on MTV, which helped enormously as well, because MTV back in the early 80s was you know, to Americans, wow, music video. You know, it was a huge thing. So that did help, and there's not a lot of sort of mediums for young bands these days. There's YouTube, but in a sense, but there's just so much. You know, it's not like it's not focused. You know what I mean? So it's very hard for young bands to do that. But I think determination, sticking together, and playing live as much as you can, really, you go through the good and the bad and the tough and this times, all of those emotions together help bond you, and you know, and I mean, you know, we've lived a life together, and that you can't really teach someone. But you know, then all the bands from the 80s, like the Divinals, Chisel, the Angels, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, really, doesn't it? You know, it's who you leave out that you know you're guilty of. But we all grew up in the pubs, you know, and any weekend or weekday you could go to your local pub and see, you know, amazing bands playing.
Yes.
You know, and people couldn't get to the bar because the venues were so packed before they brought in the fire laws and that. There was never any king punches back then, you know. People were having too good a time. They were getting their rocks off watching bands, and when they left, you know, they were all exhausted just about. There was none of, you know, there was none of this. And I think that's got a lot to do with perhaps some of the king-hitting violence that sort of happens in our society today, is that there's just not enough entertainment for people, you know.
It's true.
All they can do is get shit-faced, you know.
Basically, that's it.
Instead of the guys in the band on stage getting shit-faced.
Can we go back? You talked a little bit about you having classical guitar lessons. Who was your teacher, and what did you get out of that?
A lot. I got a lot out of it. My teacher initially was a fellow from the West Australian Symphony Orchestra named Tony Federici, or probably was Antonio Federici, and he was a lovely old man. I adored him. I was only 7, 8. Our father made sure all of us learnt to play an instrument when we got to the age of 7, 8. And he was a trombonist with the Western Australian Orchestra who had a real passion for, now I think about it, his classical guitars were all handmade things, and they must have been worth a fortune today. But he had some beautiful instruments, and you know, he used to sit down and explain to me, but I was in such awe of his penmanship with the fountain pen and ink and the way he'd write sheet music and stuff that, you know, I was kind of like, just like, whoa. I wasn't really listening to a lot of what he said, but he taught me to write music too in a classical, you know, he showed me chord patterns and then how to sort of, basically how to pick and play, you know, Spanish guitar. Like I used to go home and practice this.
Rasguardo.
Yeah, just over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and until I got it, and then I learnt to play basic Spanish guitar as well, and I loved that. And he would accompany me, and it was like, as soon as he started accompanying me, as soon as I could, you know, put a few things together and came back and after practicing, could go through, you know, 32 bars of music, he would pick up a mandolin and all of a sudden we'd be playing something together, and that was like, whoa, you know, I was like, wow, this is it, this is what I want to do, you know, I like playing music with people, you know, because together it sounds fantastic, you know, it sounds so much better, you know, to me, you know, like the voice is the cherry on the cake, but really it's what the band does, or the musical instruments combined, that makes magic to me. And so right from there, I've always been that kind of a guitar player, whereas I feel like, you know, I'm the E, B, and G string of a 6-string guitar, and the D and the A and the other E is over there. You know what I mean? Sort of thing. So it's kind of like that for me, and I just love making music with other people, and it's one of those things where, you know, someone will pass me a guitar and say, play something, and I'll play something, and I say, yeah, but you have to hear what Kirk does
to have it make sense.
To have it make sense. You know what I mean? And throughout, because we learnt to play together, and then my 2 brothers, I learnt to play with them. They learnt to play with me. Kirk learnt to play with me. We all played together, with the exception of Andrew being the main songwriter. You know, even songwriting sort of changed because you had Porter Studios, and now people have sequences and write things on Cubase Audio or Pro Tools or whatever. I mean, now it's probably Garage, you know, but which is kind of cheating in a way, because you used to learn to have to play something and you actually wrote it, you know what I mean, without sort of, you know, I mean, having said that, in my own recording studio, I would play all kinds of things and different solos in a piece, and then I would put it all into a sampler and play it back in, and actually write a solo off a keyboard, and then learn the solo once I'd sequenced the solo, and then learn to play it straight, which is quite a useful writing tool in itself. But it, you know, those were the days when I smoked a lot of pot and drank a lot of beer, and so it helped the memory quite a lot. You know? Yeah.
So that wasn't in keeping with your Christian band?
No, I wasn't Christian for that long, trust me.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. The other thing I read somewhere that you were listening to like progressive rock bands like Yes and...
Yes, we did.
I was... Because I can't...
King Crimson.
Right.
Gentle Giant.
I can't really put my finger on who you sound like.
Right.
Really, it is a band all of its own. So I am really interested in the influences that go to make up your...
The INXS sound, isn't
Yeah.
it? Well, I mean, to be brutally honest, probably Gary and Kirk were mostly into that sort of Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, you know, John Anderson, Gentle Giant, King Crimson kind of thing. About as close as I got was Roxy Music. I mean, no, that's not true. I mean, I loved listening to those guys too, but my heart was always more into R&B, you know,
like
soul, or Curtis Mayfield,
right?
You know, and my parents' records, Motown,
Actually, yeah,
that kind of thing.
I think I can see that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's why in a way I'm like the riff guy, because
Yeah.
it'd be like the bouncing on and to a large degree kind of that reggae has a lot to do with stuff. And in fact, if you listen to the Eagles verge on disco to me. One of these nights, that's just about disco.
Bee Gees.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And so that kind of thing was always, and hence my fascination with Nile Rodgers and why we ended up working with him. And he, and his work he did with David Bowie, and then Duran Duran went and used him. I just wanted to get across the fact that we used him first.
Actually, that's something I didn't know. I'd done a fair bit of reading about you, and I'd not come across that you worked with Nile Rodgers.
Yep, Original Sin. I was a big fan of his solo album, In the Land of the Good Groove, and I used to play it on the tour bus when we were travelling to and fro all over the US, and I would drive the other guys crazy. And there was a song he had. I can't remember what the actual song was called, but the lyric went "Poontang, poontang, where you want it, slept all night with my hands on it. Give me some of the yum yum. Give me some of that yum yum before I sleep tonight." Well, that was that kind of thing that Michael would warm up on vocally, and that we'd all sing together right before we walked out into the arenas or wherever and play live, travelling across wherever we were. And we were at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, which is a stadium, and we were doing a show there, and we came off stage into this huge dressing room, and we were all talking. There was a zillion people backstage. We were all talking, having a great time. And Michael came over and said, "Timmy, there's someone you want to meet." I'm like, "Okay." And I walked over and he goes, "Tim, this is Nile Rodgers." And I was like, "Holy no way," We just got along great, and we all hung out for a while, and then we agreed we should get together at the Power Station studio in New York because he had a weekend coming up, and we figured out at the end of that particular tour, we were then heading off to Japan, we could go into the Power Station studio. He was recording or producing Hall & Oates at the time, and at Electric Ladyland, and so we went into the Power Station, and Andrew and Michael sort of finished writing Original Sin while we booked a rehearsal room down in Tampa or Miami in Florida. And we sort of all got together and learnt the song, went into the Power Station, put down the rhythm track, pretty much did it all in 2 days. And then Daryl Hall came in and sang BVs on it, which was fantastic. And Nigel was just a great guy to work with. He was just so up, and it was awesome. He ended up coming and playing live with us on a few dates in New York City, and we went straight from there to Japan and made the video in Tokyo. Right. And he set me up with Tokai guitars, because I said to him, "Niall, look, that sound you get on those Michael Jackson records and that Diana Ross, Upside Down, that funky sort of out of phase sound. It's really unique to you, and I noticed when I watched him play, a lot of it's all downstrokes. There's very little upstrokes with Nile. It's all down, like this. And I said, "Well, what guitar did you use on China Girl, or Let's Dance, because he did the Bowie album." And he came out and he goes, "This, man," and it looked like a Strat, and I'm going, "It's a Strat." And I goes, No, look carefully. And Tokai actually wrote Tokai, like Fender. And he goes, "It's a Japanese copy of a vintage Fender," which they did. They even found really old copper wire, to wind the pickups with, hand wound the pickups, vintage wood they made the necks out of, and they actually replicated vintage Fender guitar, or all kinds of guitars. And he said, "You want to get hooked up with Tokai?" And I went, "Yeah." And we got to Tokyo straight after this recording session, made the video. But the guy from Tokai met us at the airport, which is amazing, and proceeded to send me guitar after guitar after guitar.
Do you still have them all?
No, a lot of them slipped through the cracks. People went, "He's got so many," And I don't know where they all went, to be honest. I've still got a few, my favourite ones, not all my favourite ones. For instance, there's a guitar they make called a Talbot, which is a signature teardrop shape. I've played it all my career just about, along with my Telecaster, of course. But the Talbots have an aluminium body, and so if you get the 3 single pole pickup variation, unlike a Stratocaster when it's plugged into like 4 Marshall amps and quad boxes, you know, they back a lot of noise, right? Well, the actual aluminium shields the pickups, so they're quiet as. You hardly get any hum or noise, which is brilliant. So for live, it just made, and it sounds great. And so I played that at Wembley. You can see that guitar at Wembley. I don't know where that guitar is. It's one of life's great mysteries. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I know a lot of the guys in the band all have one.
Well, you got to work with a lot of good producers.
Yeah, we did. Chris Thomas, just whoa, hand of God, an amazing man.
Well, you know. What was the experience like? I don't even know how to ask the question.
Well, at first I didn't really realise just how amazing he was.
Yeah.
I was a bit naive, didn't really care. You know, life was just so full on and busy and hectic, and I knew he'd produced Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols, and I knew he'd done all the Pretenders records, and because we actually met him when we played with the Pretenders, right. He saw us live, and then he kept coming and seeing us. He saw us at the Palladium in Los Angeles, and to this day you can ask him, I've seen it, he rarely does interviews, but I've seen him say in an interview that he did do that show of ours at the Palladium in Los Angeles, he thought was one of the best shows he'd ever seen by any band, which coming from him is like an amazing thing to say. Mm-hmm. So it must have been a good gig. And I mean, I knew he'd done that, but it wasn't until we were actually sitting in the studio at Rhinoceros here in Sydney doing Listen Like Thieves with him, which was the first album we did with Chris, that he said, you know, to all the guys in the band, you know, what's your favourite album? And he turned to Kirk, you know, and asked Kirk. I can't remember what Kirk said, but what the other guys said. But when it came to me, I said probably For Your Pleasure by Roxy Music. And he goes, I produced that. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, wow. He goes, I produced 7 Roxy Music albums. I was like, no way. And so we started talking about what he'd done, and yeah, his first gig was Dark Side of the Moon. You're the guy that didn't turn the phone off.
I thought I had that.
Just. But then of course, well, he mixed Dark Side of the Moon. I think his actual first thing was the Beatles' White Album, and he talked about all the stuff he did with the Beatles in making that record, and how all the sort of experimentation they did at the time, and that, which is really kind of neat to hear from the horse's mouth. You know, of course, the Beatles to us are amazing. They were the first band the 3 Farriss brothers ever saw, because we were in England. It's a long story, but we were in England. And we saw the Beatles play live on a television show.
Oh, okay.
And we were in the audience,
right.
And we actually, we
right,
actually met George Harrison and whatnot. That's another interview.
Yeah.
But and then so you know, hearing all the stuff from Chris, and then all the other people he'd produced, mm-hmm. The list just got quite phenomenal, you know. And it was like, whoa, this guy's a heavyweight. But as he's also still probably one of my closest friends. Right. You know, I actually, you know, have an awesome relationship with the guy. I love him to death, and he's just a wonderful man. And he's sort of, it's hard to describe. He's so not what you'd expect, but he's very old school producer, and I think that's awesome. And you know, the world needs more of them. You know what I mean? And you know, so by the time we finished making Listen Like These, we just kind of got it into this groove, and we'd finished recording What You Need, because that was the single that the album was missing. He said we needed a. He just hadn't heard the right single yet, so we worked on over a weekend and came up with What You Need, and then put that down, and we thought we had a record. And sure enough, that was our first top 5 hit in the US. And after that, we went and toured, and things were going through the roof by that stage for us, and still hadn't quite cracked the UK and Europe. So we were actually touring with Queen all over Europe and the UK, and they were fantastic guys to hang out with and tour with. They'd take us out for dinner all the time. I spent a night in Montreux in Freddie's presidential suite with just he and Michael, Freddie was playing some new stuff. He had this massive PA system in his room, or stereo and a microphone, and he and Michael, their noses were this far apart, were singing like this, and I was sitting on the couch going like, what am I doing here? Two great singers who are no longer with us. But that's the kind of guys they were. Brian May had come into our dressing room before they went on stage, and he'd be just noodling like this in our dressing room. Like we'd be like, Brian, don't you have your own dressing room to go to? Do you have to come in here and show off? He's an awesome guitarist. Oh. Great people. It was great to see Brian and Roger out here, still keeping the Queen flag flying. And I guess we have a sort of certain sympathy with them because they've been through the same thing as us. Not quite the same. They unfortunately for them, they had to watch Freddie die. For us, Michael, it was just gone. It was just like bang, there 1 minute, gone the next. But how they feel about their music and Freddie's music and keeping him alive in their hearts and in everybody else's hearts by keeping their music alive. Just because you lose a family member doesn't mean you stop being a family. And that's the way we've always looked at it, and we've always felt like, you have your critics that say, these guys should have called it a day when Michael died, and we nearly did. But at the end of the day, that's not their choice.
No, I don't see why, because, there's a lot more to... He was one of the fellas, of course.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And Michael would be the first one to say, I'm the singer. He turned down the Rolling Stone front cover because Rolling Stone magazine in the US, they never would put the band on first time the band was the front cover story. It was always the singer. And so they came... it might be in the miniseries.
It's in the movie.
It is,
yes, yeah.
And Michael said, no, it has to be the whole band. So he turned it down.
That's kind of not... It's a bit more flippant in the movie, but he made a conscious...
It was a pretty big deal because the cover of Rolling Stone's a big deal.
Yeah.
So to us, we were like, you sure, Michael? We're missing out on the cover of Rolling Stone because you're not doing it. Even though it's only you that's on the cover, really it is the band. It's just that it's just you. And he went, no, we're a band. So there you go. And if people knew that that's how he felt, they might be a little bit more sympathetic to how we felt since his passing.
So what's coming up in the future for you?
Well, it's funny. I really enjoyed the television experience. All the television experiences I've had actually have been... And
they're starting to back up
really,
now, aren't
yeah,
they?
they are. Actually, with the Rockstar INXS thing we did in the States, that was a massive thing to do. It was a $30 million budget, and we were in CBS studios in Hollywood for 6 months, shooting 3 days a week. And I was kind of the focal guy in the band for that too. So I've had a lot to do with it. So I really quite enjoy that, and I quite enjoy writing music for film and television. So I plan to do quite a bit of that at the moment. As far as INXS is concerned, both my youngest brother John and Gary in the last few years have had babies, so they're busy being fathers. But I'm pretty sure that pretty soon, that there could be lots of things in the wind coming up for us soon. There's only so much sort of off time you can have before you start going home. Look, the family is sick of clapping every time I walk in the door. So you just miss it. You miss playing live. But more than sort of performing in front of an audience, I just miss playing with the guys. We've always had a great time. When I first saw the first draft of the script for the television movie, I said, there's not enough fun in this. We had the best time.
From day one.
From day one, we were laughing our heads off the whole time, you know, and we really were. It was like, they were constantly making each other laugh, in jokes, and it was just really hard to try and get that in the script, but that's how it was.
Look, that's what came across to me watching it, was that you were just out there having fun.
Because I worked really hard at getting that in there.
Yeah. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Tim, I know you got a ferry to catch.
Yeah, ferry.
Yeah.
As in
not
manly
ferry.
ferry. Yeah.
So it's
Thank
been an
you,
absolute
Steve.
pleasure.
Yeah, my
I'd love to
pleasure.
do it again sometime.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, great.